Also, welcome. I know we have several guests here today. Thanks for being here. We're glad to have you. I also know there are a few young ones out there. I heard the sound of a child, which brought music to my ears. And if that's your child, I want you to know it is okay if they make noise. I live in a household full of children. We have 4 of them. And I am so used to the noise. So no worries about noise or that kind of thing. Also, I want to just welcome my friend here, Mike Hammond, and his wife Tara, okay, with a long A. They're visiting today. Surprising, I didn't know. He didn't tell me. He just showed up. I don't know if he's spying on me or what, but he's also a pastor and interested in the EFCA, and I think you guys were on your way to Branson and swung by to critique me. So but what he said was worship with you, so that's good. Thanks for coming. You guys welcome him when you get a chance later. As I mentioned today, we have a special day. We're going to do communion today, and then after communion, we are going to go outside on the back patio, and we're going to do a baptism service. And today, I'm excited to baptize Judine and Becky. So we're excited about that. It's going to be a fun day. Judine said she did not want to give a speech, but Becky has a 20-minute speech, you said? Yeah. Okay, good. I am just kidding. No speeches. What was that? With visuals. Okay. Judine instead was doing an interpretive dance beforehand. So we're going to start a new series, and this series is called The Survey of the Bible. And what made me decide on this series was I asked my children, what do you guys think I should do a series on? And several of them, one, Jonathan in particular, said, I think you should do a series on every book of the Bible. And I'm like, dude, we'll be there for 100 weeks. And then I said, that's a great idea. So we're doing that. But it won't be 100 weeks. And what my goal is in this is just to kind of give a flyover over the whole Bible so we understand the context, the people, the places, the different time periods that are happening in there, and what it's all about. And as I started researching and studying for this, I started to realize that it's probably going to help you a lot because it's helping me a lot. So the Old Testament has lots of books. The New Testament has lots of books, and it's quite overwhelming, right? How many books and where they are and what they're about and what they're for. Real quickly, this is the simplest part of it. The Old Testament has 39 books, and the New Testament has 27 books. And if you add 39 to 27 on a good day, you'll get 66. So there are 66 books in the whole Bible. How many books are in the Bible? Say 66. Okay, so then how do you remember how many are in the Old Testament? Well, you can just memorize it, 39, or you can do a little trick. You want to see a trick? The trick is how many letters are in the word old? O-L-D, that's 3. So then you write the number 3. How many letters are in the word testament? 9. Then you write that. So now you know you get Old Testament is 39 books. If you can do math, then you can figure out, subtract 39 from 66. You'll know how many are in the New Testament, 27. Or you can also do this. How many letters are in the word new? 3. How many letters are in the word testament? It should be the same as the other one, just to let you know, right? It would be 9, right? So this time take 3 times 9. I don't know if you can do 3 times 9 or what, right? What is 3 times 9? 27, okay? That's just an easy way for you to remember if you want to, okay? So there's a lot of math going on there, and you know how I feel about math. There are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who are good at math, those who are bad at math. Never mind. Okay, so that's the whole Bible right there. 39, 27 equals 66 books. Today, and for the next several weeks, we're going to focus on just the Old Testament. And the Old Testament has a lot of books. And raise your hand if you've ever read the book of Nahum. Okay, cool. Raise your hand if you ever read the book of Haggai. A couple of you. All right, so there's a lot of books in there you may not even heard of, you can't even pronounce, and you definitely can't spell, like Zephaniah, right? Or Zechariah, or Nahum. I always have a hard time with that one. Obadiah. And so what I'm going to do today is tell you about the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament, we're going to say there's how many books? 39 books. And we're going to divide that whole Old Testament into 3 categories, okay? So the first category is here, all right? And it's 17 books, and it ends in the book of Esther. So starts in Genesis, goes all the way to the book of Esther. Then I'm going to divide it a second time to another 17 books, And these I'm going to call the prophets because they are all prophets. From Isaiah, the first prophet, all the way to Malachi or Malachi, the last prophet, okay? So that's also 17. Again, with the numbers, 17 and 17 are easy to remember, right? There are 17 historical books, you can say, and 17 prophetic books. But Mike, I'm smarter than you, and I know that that does not equal 69. I mean, 39. Sorry. 30. How many books are in the Old Testament? 39. Thank you. See, my math. So you're right. There's 5 more books, and those books are right there. And we're going to call these books poetry or wisdom books. People call it different things. And that's Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. So that's all of the books. Again, 17 and 17 plus 5 make, according to my calculations, 39. So the way we divide the Bible, I think, will help you understand the whole picture of what's going on there. So the first 17 books are historical, we'll say that. And the second section is prophetical, and then we've got some poetry in the middle. So we got the story. One thing you can say is that from Genesis to Esther is the story, okay? It's the story of the whole Bible. What happens in Genesis? Abraham, Moses, Joseph, King David, the following kings, Esther, right? All of these people. That's a story. And honestly, I could tell you that the story is just over here. The story is just from Genesis to Esther. That's all. This is not part of the story. And the poetry is not part of the story either, right? Poetry is just music to the story, if you will. And these things right here, I'm going to call, they're prophecies, but I'm going to call them sermons. They're sermons that get attached to the story, but they're not the story. Does that make sense? The story is over here. And so that's all you really need to know. And so I'll give you an example. If we're going through the story of the Bible and we get to 1 Samuel, I happen to know that King David, 2 Samuel, excuse me, King David comes into office in 2 Samuel, right? You guys remember King David? I also know that King David wrote the Psalms. So where does the Psalms go in this story? It just goes right in here, right? And then, of course, I know that Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. You guys remember the book of Song of Solomon? I mean, Ecclesiastes, excuse me. Okay, no wonder you didn't laugh at my joke because it did not land because you did not do it right. Y'all remember the book of Ecclesiastes? We just got out of a series last week, so all right. These 3 books go where Solomon lives because Solomon wrote those 3 books, and he lives down here in 2 Kings, so we're going to stick him there. Does that make sense? If all of these books fit down here, where do all these books go? And just to let you know, all of these books are going to fit down here, just at the very last 4 books of the story. All of these prophets squeeze down to the very bottom half. So really, if you wanted to understand the whole story of the Bible, of the Old Testament, I should say, it's really just those first 11 books. All of the rest of this stuff is just added commentary, sermons, poetry that go with the same story. Does that make sense? I'm going to unpack this a couple of different ways today because some of you say that it makes sense, but I could tell by the look on your face that it doesn't. You're like, and I'm going to tell the story in different ways as well so that we can remember it. And by the time this series is over, this whole series, like not just today, but for the next 6, 8, 12, 20, 30, 66 weeks, you're going to have it all down, okay? We're going to get it. Now, the story part of the Old Testament, or the historical part, can also be broken up into 2 parts. Not to get too confusing, but it is important. The first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, those are 5, and they're called in Hebrew the Pentateuch. Again, you guys like to say it with me in Hebrew so you can clear your throat? The Pentateuch. And penta just means 5, like a pentagram, yeah? Like a stop sign has, no, not, what's a pentagon? Thank you. Stop signs are pentagons. Penta. Well, I never look at them anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, I obviously haven't paid them that much attention. Pentagram, pentagon. Let me just continue with my point, means 5. Okay? So the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible. You can also call it the Torah, all right? Some people also call it the Torah. If you hear the word Torah, they're talking about the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible, okay? Then the rest of the books of the Bible are just more historical context, more historical. It's the story. It's continuing on the story. Obviously, poetry is poetry. And then we've got prophets, and the prophets are also divided into two sections, and that is major versus minor. And the reason why one is major and the other one is minor is not because one's got more degrees than the other. It is because they're bigger, right? They're just bigger books. Isaiah is a big one, all right? When I first married, before I married Kelly, we were dating, and I was learning how to do Bible study, and I was learning how to do really intense Bible study where you would like spend a whole day on just one chapter, you know what I mean? And then try to outline and graph. And I told myself, man, now that I've learned this skill, I'm gonna write commentaries. I thought I was gonna be a commentator. And so I told my wife, I'm gonna I'll write whatever her favorite book is, I'll start my first commentary on that, so I can then use it twofold, one for school and one to impress her. You know, that'd be awesome. And I said, what's your favorite book? And you never guess what she said. Jeremiah, which incidentally is the longest of them. I think I got about a third of the way through before it was time. It was too late. I gave up. It was too big of a project. So the major prophets and the minor prophets. That's it. Another thing that's interesting to remember is that the first part of the story, which is 17 books, the top 5 is the Torah, and then when we do the 17 prophets, the top 5 are the major prophets. Okay, it's pretty. That's almost like God did that on purpose, right? We got 2 columns: history or story, prophets. The top 5 of both is the Torah and the major prophets. Okay, everything else goes below. Any questions? Don't ask them if you do, because we don't have time. So there is the whole Bible, the whole Old Testament for you to remember. So just remember that. Now, one question that you might have, and people have asked me before, is, are these placed in chronological order? And the answer is no, they're not placed in chronological order, because when you look at the Bible, it flips like this, and then like this, and then like this. But believe it or not, where's Jonah? Jonah is not down here in the story. I told you, right? He's in here in the story. And same with Nahum. Nahum is in here in the story. And what about Malachi? He's down here. You wouldn't believe it that some of these are over here, right? So it's not in chronological order. So if you read Genesis to Malachi, you're not reading a story in chronological order. Okay? Does that make sense? You finish the story over here, and then all this other stuff just is more commentary about the story. Does that make sense? I think it does. You know what might be helpful is, why don't I just tell you the story so you understand the story? I am going to tell the story using this map. And what I find fascinating about this map is, I was thinking about this last night at 3:30 in the morning, or that would have been this morning at 3:30 in the morning. Do you ever guys get up to go to the bathroom at 3 in the morning and you cannot go back to sleep? Gosh, I hate that. I hate that. And it happens to me every Saturday night for some reason. I was thinking about that. I think it's because on Sunday night, I just say, well, I'll get up, I'll go to the bathroom. If I have to take a nap later, I will. Or if I have to sleep in, I will, because I can. But on Sunday, I cannot. So then it stresses me out. And then I lay there and I think. And I was thinking about the Game of Thrones. I was thinking about Narnia. I was thinking about the world of the Lord of the Rings. And I was thinking about the Count of Monte Cristo. It all makes sense to me, not maybe to you. But what I was thinking about on all of those things, raise your hand if you've ever read the Count of Monte Cristo. Okay? Raise your hand if you've ever seen the television series the Lord of the Rings, or raise your hand about the Game of Thrones. Okay, cool. So what do all these have in common? They're confusing. You know what I mean? Like, you've got, let's say, the Lord of the Rings. You've got all these different towns, right? They're going to Evandale and Arendelle and Rivendale and Narnia. Or wait, that's not there. They're just going to all these different places, and all these different places have different kings, right? Gandalf and Gorondon and you know what I'm saying? You don't know their name. I can't even remember their names. Saruman and Sauron, you know what I mean? And you're reading and you're like, what the? You know what I mean? I have no idea what's going on. Even when you watch the movie, you're confused. Am I right? Take Game of Thrones. What I like about Game of Thrones is at the beginning of every, they do the intro. They do this little intro where they take you to all the kings, all the castles, and they show you this little animation. And that's probably the only TV series I watched where I actually watched the intro, just because it was a refresher course of who was what and where and when. You know what I mean? It's so confusing. I'm reading the Count of Monte Cristo right now with my boys, and it's French. They're all in French places. They're in the Marseille, the Marquis de Lucu, and I'm like, what is going on? Right? I have no idea what's going on. To this day, I still do not know how to pronounce the river that flows through Paris that everyone calls the Seine, the Seine, the Seine, the Seine. That does not spell like that. It's spelled with like 12 letters. Okay, so it's sin. He threw himself in the sin, and I'm reading it, Sianana and marsala sauce. Sounds like a food, making me hungry. You know what I mean? If that's the way I feel about those books, I bet you some of you feel that way about the Bible. What? They're in they're in Ur? Where's Ur? I don't know. It's where the pirates are from, right? So confusing. Raise your hand if you're like that. You're like, okay, good. So if I tell you this story using a map, like Game of Thrones, if you will, I'm going to tell you the whole story of the Old Testament in just a few minutes. I'm going to give you the bare bones, the most distilled version of it, of course. I'm going to try real hard not to give you any more detail than you need to throw us off track. And I'm going to distill it down to a few minutes, and then over the course of this series, I'm going to fill in that distillation process with a few names of characters and places, okay? Here it is. Are you ready? The story of the whole Old Testament. It starts up here. And by the way, this is the map of where Israel, whatever would be, Tigris River, Euphrates River, flowing down here to the Persian Gulf. Right here, you've got the river, Jordan River, right? Jerusalem and Sea of Galilee. And then you've got the Red Sea down here, and you got the Mediterranean over there. Right now, you hear on the news people complaining, river to the sea, river to the sea. That's this river to that sea, okay? And there's Egypt down here with the Nile River. This is the whole Bible, story of the Bible happens right there. Nowhere else. It doesn't happen in Texas. It doesn't happen in Oklahoma, right? France especially, or else we would know more about St. Louis, right? So there's none of that. It's just here. And here's how it starts, beginning now. Genesis happens up here where God created the earth, and these people scattered around after they fell, and you'll notice this on the map, they're falling, right? They fell down here. Babylon, they created Tower of Babel. They fell further until God shows up in a town called Ur and meets a man named Abraham. God tells Abraham, I want you to go with me. I'll take you to a place. So he sends Abraham back around this place through to here to Canaan, okay? Abraham starts living in Canaan, and he has children. Jacob, right? Esau, Isaac, right? Ishmael. Then they have 12 brothers. And they have 12 tribes that live in this time period, okay? And then Joseph, he's one of those brothers at the beginning of that tribe. And what happens? He gets sold into slavery by his brothers into where? Do you remember? Egypt. So he goes into Egypt, and he's in Egypt. And while he's in Egypt, he realizes there's going to be a famine, and so they bring in all this food, and they prepare it, and the great famine happens. So all of the people, all of Abraham's children, have to move to Egypt. And now they're all down there in Egypt by the Nile River. And while they're there, they get put into slavery to build the pyramids and all of those things. And then what happens? God raises up Moses, a deliverer from within this group of people in Egypt, and they come down here, and they cross the Red Sea, right? Right through there. And then while they cross the Red Sea, they come over here to what's it called? Mount Sinai, where God gives them the 10 Commandments, and they go from the Mount Sinai. I need to just move this over here. Mount Sinai, and they come over here, and they float around over here, where they start to see that there is giants in the land, right? Moses dies, appoints Joshua. Joshua realizes that they need to cross the Jordan River and conquer Jericho. So he crosses the Jordan River, conquers Jericho, and now we have God's people living in God's promised land, okay, in Canaan. At this point, we go through a period of what's called the Judges. There's different judges judging over these 12 tribes that live through this area. Until the end of the judge period, we have what's called the United Kingdom, where God gives Israel a king. They want a king, and that king is going to rule over all of that, okay? So now this king is ruling over everything. We have Saul, we have David, and then we have Solomon. After Solomon dies, his next son is not a very good king, and none of the rest of them. And so the United Kingdom of Israel divides into two kingdoms, the north and the south, okay? Sounds like Game of Thrones, right? The north and the south. So you get the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And these people are sinning against God, and they're getting more and more wicked and more idolatrous, all right? So during this time, God raises up a group of people called the Assyrians, okay? And the Assyrians are up here. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. You might remember that city. Assyrians come down here, capture Israel, the northern kingdom, and bring them back to live inside of their land. This is called the exile. Then God raises up another group of people, the Babylonians. They're big time in the Bible. Babylonians come down here and conquer Judah and bring them back and exile them for a long time, okay? Then eventually what happens is God raises up another kingdom called Persia. Persia conquers Babylon and then tells all the Jews, why don't y'all go back home? So then they go back home and rebuild the temple with Ezra and Nehemiah, okay? The end. That's the whole story, okay? I'll do it really fast. Let me just take this. This is driving me crazy. All right, so we got creation, fell down here. Abraham was called over to Canaan after a while. Joseph was called into Egypt. Famine brought everyone into Egypt. Moses led them over the Red Sea to Mount Sinai to get the Ten Commandments. They came here. Moses died. Joshua crossed over the Jordan River into Canaan, to Jericho, and became the Israelites now in this land. It was divided by 12 tribes, ruled by different judges over a time period, and then eventually it was all united under King Saul, and then David, and then Solomon, and then Solomon's son, Rehoboam, divides the kingdom into two, north, south. During this time, they're sinning, rebelling against God, so God sends Assyria to conquer the north, brings them into exile. God sends Babylon to conquer the south, brings them into exile. God sends Alexander the Great to conquer these guys, and then they say, why don't y'all go back home? Nehemiah, okay? That's the whole story. Any questions? Now, that's the distilled version of the story. Of course, there's people inside that story like Jonah and Jacob and Esau and all that great stuff. And those are great stories, and I love them, but that's the whole story of the Old Testament. And if you can remember that, like if I was showing you a map of Narnia, of what's the world of Lord of the Rings? Middle Earth. If I was showing you the world of Middle Earth, it would make this story make a little more sense to you. If you knew where the Seine River was, or some people call it the Seine River, and you'd understand the story a little better, right? Right? You guys think you might understand the story a little better now that you see that? I hope so. All right. So let's look at this real quick. 17 books that are in the Old Testament of the story. The rest are filler. The rest are poetry and sermons or prophecies. So let me just talk about those 17 books real quick in relation to the story that I just distilled for you. How's that sound? If you wanted to read the Bible chronologically, here's how you might go about it. You would start with the book of Genesis. Remember, Genesis happened up here. And then Abraham, Joseph, into Egypt. That's all Genesis, okay? Then what's Exodus? Exodus means the exit. They exit out of Egypt through the Red Sea and out here, all right? Then we get to Leviticus. Leviticus lasts about 2 weeks. The whole book is about 2 weeks long, and it's just rules, right? So it's not a story. It's just kind of a document in the story. You can skip it if you want. You come back to it later, all right? Because it's not historical. Then you got Numbers, and then you got Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, again, very similar to Leviticus. It's about about a month long in the time period, and it's not a lot of history going on. The only thing historically that happens in that book is Moses dies. That's it. Everything else is rules, is law. And then you got Joshua. Joshua, remember, took over. Moses dies. Joshua takes over and going to take over Canaan. This is where the promised land starts happening. Conquer Canaan, okay? Then remember what I said? When Joshua goes over there and conquers Canaan, conquers Jericho, they divide into 12 tribes, and those 12 tribes are ruled by judges, and that's the next book, Judges. Judges are like Samson, Gideon, right? Some of my favorite stories. Was it Uzziah? Huh? Ehud, that's the one. I was looking at my arm because he built a sword as long as his arm, and he stabbed a fat man with it. It's a great story. A real fat man. Okay? So then the next book in your Bible, if you're looking at your table of contents right now, which I see some of you are, the next book would be Ruth. And you'd think Ruth would be next in the story right after Judges. Like it would go right here. But it doesn't. It actually goes on top of Judges. It's a story within the story. And it's a story about a woman, right, who has children, and the children get, their husbands die, and she goes to another land. It's a story within the story of the Judges. Does that make sense? It's a good story, too. Ruth. Okay. Now, that's like the first half of the Old Testament story. And because my screen isn't long enough to continue to stack this way, I am now going to stack on top. I hope that doesn't confuse you. Okay, but I'm going to stack over there now. Is that okay? All right. So now we have 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. What happens in this period? We're talking about the political realm of Israel. Okay, so God creates a king. The king is ruling over Israel. We got King Saul, King David, King Solomon. All right. So 1st and 2nd Samuel. Samuel is incidentally the last judge. He's the last judge who appoints Saul. David becomes king in 2nd Samuel. Although the story of David is all in the 1st Samuel as well. And then 1st and 2nd Kings is about the kings that follow David, which would be Solomon and all the other ones. Okay, Rehoboam, Baoboam, all of those bones. Okay? Are you with me so far? So far, pretty darn easy. If you wanted to read the Bible and chronologically, you would just read it just like this. You can skip Leviticus, Deuteronomy, come back to it later. You read Ruth as sort of kind of like a break, like a halftime show, and then you go back to the story here. Some of you are smart. You're wondering, what about Chronicles? I've always wondered where that was. Raise your hand if that's you. Okay, so Chronicles, one of you. Okay, I'll answer this question for you then, and you alone. First Chronicles is actually the same story as 1st Samuel and 2nd Kings. It's telling this. It's basically telling that whole story again, but in a different mind or different eyes. Commentators will tell you that 1 Samuel through 2 Kings is kind of the main story, or maybe even the political version of the story, and then 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles is a retelling of that story through the priest's eyes, the priestly view of those stories. But it's the same story. If you really want to get the story, like what did David do, who did he kill, and where and when did he cut the guy's garment off, that's all 1st, 2nd Samuel and Kings, okay? Chronicles is going to be more explaining kind of what happened and how God felt about it, okay? Does that make sense? Are you with me so far? Is this exciting? Are you learning a lot? You guys are going to go back and watch the movie now, and you'll understand it a lot more. Okay, now something very interesting happens after Kings, because I told you what happened. Remember, in 1st and 2nd Samuel, we had Saul and David and Solomon, but then after that, we had the divided kingdom, and the kingdom got divided. And why were they divided? Because they were sinning against God, and they were, creating idols, and all these other kings came around. Josiah was one of the kings who said, no, you guys need to stop doing the idols, and Hezekiah and all these other ones bringing in the idols. And so during this time, God is angry with his people, and so he exiles them to Assyria and Babylon, okay? The exile lasts 70 years. So while they're exiled for 70 years, there are some books that are written, and those books are Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah. So think about this real quick. You might not know Ezra. Raise your hand if you've ever read Ezra. One of you, two of you, three of you, four of you. All right. Next week I'll bring candy. If you raise your hand, I'll throw it to you. Ezra is about going back to rebuild the temple, so we know he's at the end of that exile. And Esther, you remember the story of Esther? Hadassah, she gets exiled out of Israel. She goes to Persia, right? And she marries King Xerxes, and so that her story is going to be in that exile period, obviously. And then also we have Nehemiah, who's clearly in Babylon or in Persia, and he's asking the king, can I go back and rebuild the temple? And he says, yeah, why don't you go back and rebuild the temple? And we're at the end of that story I told you, remember? They're exiled, they come back, rebuild the temple. Wait for Jesus. That's the end. Amen? Isn't that cool? Some of you are like, we're not done yet. Some of you are like, oh no, there's 17 plus 5 more books. Where do we put those, Mike? You guys want to know? Okay, what's the next book? What's the first book in the wisdom category? Job. Job is a story about a man, right, who lost everything, and God and the devil are talking about him, okay? And so most commentators say that they believe that Job happens very early on in the Bible, and so they place it in this area here, and around this Genesis story. Contextually, you can tell he's got these cattle, he's got these sheep. The commentators just put him there. Okay, who wrote the next one? The next one was Psalms, right? Someone say right. Who wrote Psalms? David. So where did David live? He lived in 1 Samuel. He was a shepherd boy playing his harp or his lute out in the wilderness, watching the baby sheep, right? That's where he writes his songs, some of them. Then his son is Solomon, and Solomon wrote the rest of them, right? Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs. So they all go right there. Simple as that, right? That's pretty darn obvious. The hardest part is when we get to the next one, which is these prophets. 5 major, the rest minor, remember? Okay, where do the major prophets go? Well, you might remember that the kingdoms got divided around 2 Kings, right? And 1st and 2nd Kings. And then they're sinning against God, and God is saying, stop sinning against me or I will have to punish you. And if you read Isaiah, he says, I will send foreign adversaries to come and conquer you, right? Just like you did. And we know the story over here is Babylon, Assyria are going to come get them. So God's preaching to Israel during this period, before the exile, during this period, turn from your wicked ways. Isaiah, turn. Oh, good book. It's actually one of my favorite. My wife's favorite is Jeremiah. It's there as well. Preaching to the same people. Hey, y'all need to listen or God's going to send mean people. Do you know what Xerxes looks like? I mean, have you seen the movie? Oh, gosh, scary. Spartan 300, it's a great movie to see what he looks like. Lamentations, also written there, okay? Also written in this period. So as you can see, a lot of God's prophets that he's sending is to this period. What's interesting is that the whole Bible so far ends there. This part of the story from Genesis all the way to 2 Kings, you probably know pretty well. You probably know the story. Now you can contextually say the people that Isaiah and Jeremiah and the Lamentations are to these people, oh, woe are you for sinning against God. And then we have Ezekiel. Ezekiel was written during the time of the exile. And then also his contemporary by the name of Daniel, right? Daniel was in exile. Remember, he had a king that got thrown into the lion's den. So he's in exile, so he wrote here. All right, so now you're thinking to yourself, I think I got this, Mike. If you stop right here, I might keep it. Now we're going to keep going. I think you'll get it because the rest of them are all of these really small ones that you tend to ignore anyway, right? The minor prophets, where do they go? Well, I'll tell you. The first set of minor prophets they go right there again. Right there in that 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles area where God is preaching and sending preachers, sending sermons to these kings and to these people of these kings saying, y'all better listen or I tell you the truth, mean people are going to come get you. And so, all right, what about the last ones? What are the last ones? We got like Jonah, Micah, Nahum. I know Jonah. We all know the story of the whale, right? Where does that one go? Well, it also goes right there. It's just you almost start to see the picture now that God is spending a lot of effort, sending a lot of prophets, sending a lot of teachers to these people saying, y'all need to repent. Y'all need to get right before God or else God does not want to let the Babylonians and the Syrians and the Persians to win. God wants the Israelites to win. Y'all need to come back together and listen to God, hearken unto God, right? It's good stuff. Then we have the last 3, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, and those are put right here. So they're contemporaries of Ezra to go back and rebuild the temple, Haggai and Zechariah. You can read about that. And then the last one is Malachi, and he's a contemporary of Nehemiah. And so again, we were going back to rebuild the final temple, or not the final, but the final for the Old Testament. And Malachi is writing to him, and then there's 400 years until the book of Matthew. Okay? You got it? That's good. I thank you. Thank you. I got approved. So there's the whole Bible. The whole Old Testament, I should say. And now that you understand where the rivers are and where the places are and where the people are and where the books go, maybe it will be more understanding when we start to go through the other Bibles. You say, okay, I get this. I know exactly where that river is. You've never been there. You probably won't go there anytime soon. You've been there. You fought there? Yeah. So you've seen the Mediterranean and the sea, you've been to that whole area. Tigris and Euphrates. Awesome. Jordan? Nile? Baghdad. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I start to get confused is when you say, okay, I understand the historical world, and then you start to overlay the modern map. Oh, gosh, now I'm really confused because they keep changing anyway. You know what I mean? But anyway, it's maybe it's something we will do in this series as well, so that you guys, because you see it on the news all the time, and you say, oh wow, that's Babylon, that's Assyria, that's the Persians. You know what I mean? That's coming back. It's all coming. It's all on the news all the time, right? All right, so that's the whole story of the Bible. I'm going to end there. But just to let you know, I'm going to tell that 2-minute story again and again and again so that we got it like sunk in. And I'm going to put those books in that area. And we're going to start to fill it in a little bit and talk more about Lot and more about David and more about these characters, Ruth and Elijah and Ezekiel. I mean, you're going to see all that, okay? Does that sound exciting? Someone say yes. At least one more person. Okay, cool, good. Now we get to thank God for his glorious gift that he gave us when he sent his son, which happens in the New Testament, right? Promised in the Old Testament. He's sending his son to die for our sins. And on the night in which he was betrayed, he gathered his disciples around him. He held up the bread and he broke it and he said, take, eat, this is my body, which is given for the sins of many, right? He wants people to eat his body. He said that. Eat it, because it's going to save you of your sins. And then he took the cup, which was a cup of wine, and he passed it around his disciples, and he said, take, drink, this is my blood, which is spilt out for the sins of many. And he said, as often as you gather, I want you to do it to remember me. Remember what I did for you. And then he added, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to eat or drink of this until I do it again with you in the kingdom. So while you're on earth, do it, and then one day we're all going to be together in the kingdom, and we'll do it together. Isn't that cool? At Seasons of Faith, we practice what's called an open table, which means everyone is welcome. You didn't have to have originally seen a priest and confessed yesterday before coming to the table today. You didn't have to do that. You don't have to be a member of our church. You don't have to give financially to our bucket. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is say, I want to be a part of this institution that Christ himself established when he said, as often as you gather, do this to remember that I spilled my blood and I broke my body for the sins of the world. And if that's you, then you're welcome, okay? And the way we do it is we start with this aisle, comes down, then, I don't remember. Y'all figure it out. Do you guys go that way? I can't remember. Okay, all right, and then this one goes that way. Y'all know better than I do. But I will say that the one thing that we're doing differently today is I'm going to ask Judine and I almost said Kathy, I'm sorry. Oh, I need to put it on a map, then I'll remember. Judine and Becky to come first so that they have time to get ready for our celebration afterwards. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, I give you thank you so much for your grace and for your love and for your mercy and for your story, the story that you have been writing from the beginning of time and putting it in our hands to read it and understand it and love it. And I hope, Lord, that as we study these texts, this series, studying the Bible, understanding the Bible, that it will start to consume us and fuel us and inflame us inside to understand you more better and to understand how we should serve you more better. I pray, Lord, that as we come to this table together, all of us, one body gathered around one table, I pray, Lord, that you will speak to our hearts, allow us to hear your individual message to us, what it is that you want us to remember that you're dying for. We're sinners. All of us in this room are sinners. And as we come forward to take this bread and of this cup, we are confessing our sin to you. And we're asking you to forgive us for our sin, which we know that we have received in this bread and in this cup. And we're also asking you to help us conquer the sin, fight the sin, win against this sin. I ask, Lord, that as everyone comes forward, that you will set that in their hearts today. We give you praise, we give you glory, and worship and honor for who you are. And we ask this in his name. Amen.